Okay, how's it going, everybody? So we're going to read V.I. Lenin. This is The Black Hundreds, written in 1913. So it's important to understand that the Black Hundreds is what was called an extreme right group, kind of like a police, help group, I guess, almost. Very bourgeois, backwards, reactionary, and I mean racist and all kinds of everything you can imagine with groups that we kind of have similar today to the Black Hundreds here in the United States that are all, connected. They work with the police and they all have history and like the CIA and things like that. So it's a similar thing. Let's go ahead and get into this. This is the Black Hundreds. This is written in 1913 in Pravda Truda. Let's go ahead and get into this. There's in our Black Hundred movement one exceedingly original and exceedingly important feature that has not been the subject of sufficient attention. That feature is ignorant peasant democracy. Democracy of the crudest type, but also extremely deep-seated. No matter how much the commanding classes try to fence our political parties off from the people, both by means of the June 3rd election law and by thousands of peculiar features of our peculiar system, reality has its way. Every political party, even of the extreme right, has to seek some sort of link with the people. The extreme rights constitute the party of the landowners. They cannot, however, confine themselves to links with the landowners alone. They have to conceal those links and pretend that they are defending the interests of the entire people, that they stand for the good old stable way of rural life. Good old stable is in quotation marks. They have to appeal to the most deep-rooted prejudices of the most backward peasant. They have to play on his ignorance. Such a game cannot be played without risk. Now and again, the voice of the real peasant life, peasant democracy, breaks through all the Black Hundred mustiness and cliche. Then the rights are compelled to get rid of the inconvenient peasant democracy. Naturally, the banishment, so inconvenient, the rights are compelled to get rid of the inconvenient is in quotation marks, peasant democracy. Naturally, this banishment of the most faithful Black Hundreds, their expulsion from their own camp by the extreme rights because of their democracy, is not without its educational effect on the masses. Bishop Nikan, an extreme right-winger, has, for instance, been forced to abandon his Duma work. Why? A letter from Bishop Nikan himself, published in Yeniseiskaya Misil, gives a clear answer to this. It stands to reason that Bishop Nikan dare not speak openly about the reasons for his withdrawal. But Bishop Nikan, quoting a letter from a peasant, does write, quote, "The land, bread, and other important questions of our Russian life and of the region do not appear to reach either the hands or the hearts of the authorities or the Duma. These questions, and such solution of them as is possible, are regarded as utopian, hazardous, untimely. Why do you keep silent? What are you waiting for? For moods and revolts for which those same undernourished, hungry, unfortunate peasants will be shot down? We are afraid of big issues and reforms. We limit ourselves to trivialities and trifles, good though they may be." End quote. That is what Bishop Nikan writes, and that is what very many Black Hundred peasants think. It is quite understandable why Bishop Nikan had to be removed from Dam affairs and Duma speeches for such statements. Bishop Nikan expresses his Black Hundred democracy in arguments that are, in essence, very far from correct. The land, bread, and all other important questions do reach the hands and hearts and pockets of the authorities in the Duma. The authorities in the Puma provide, the authorities in the Duma, I don't know why it says Puma here, it must be a mistype. The authorities in the Duma provide such solution to these questions as is possible, and is indeed the possible solution, the one that accords with interests and power of the landowners who are dominating among the authorities and in the Duma. Bishop Nikan realizes that his Black Hundred views are being undermined by the real state of affairs. They are being destroyed by what he observes in the Duma. And in the attitude of the authorities, etc., Bishop Nikan, however, cannot understand the reason for all this, or is afraid to understand it. But reality will win through. And out of 10 in any village who think as Bishop Nikan does, 9 will, in the long run, most likely prove less obtuse in mastering the lessons of life than the bishop. Okay, yeah, so he points out that It's a very common misconception because we're always told that, well, who we call the bourgeois. The Duma, by the way, is the Congress. It's the Tsar's Congress. He says, how come the bread's not reaching the Congress? How come it can't get to the country? He thinks it's just not reaching the Tsar and the top of the economy, in Russia at the time. He just thinks it's not doing that. And Lenin's pointing out to him like, oh, it is, it is, it's kind of, but that's the truth, is that the country will see this. Like, people in the country, I'm from the country, and people from the country, we believe, as Marxists, we believe that we don't blame society on the individual. We blame the individual on society. We say that the individual's consciousness is completely dependent on their material conditions, meaning what they've been allowed to know. For example, people when they were, cooking bread over rocks and fire and going out and hunting and gathering, they wouldn't have had any concept of the internet. They never would have ever thought the internet exists. And that's because they had no material conditions there to let them know what the internet would be. So things like that are, you could look at this and realize that people will only know what they are even capable of knowing, And out in the country, when you're cut off from the rest of the city and what everyone else is doing and the different cultures that come in and the different this and that, and you see all the development in the city, you're cut off from all that. Oftentimes, there's a church, and I grew up in a church, and there's great churches, but sometimes when you're only in a church and there's a preacher there that might get corrupted or something, that's the only church that you can drive to, and it's no good when that happens, and no Christian will disagree with that, but not that that's always. Sometimes you're just there in the church, but things are simple, and you don't have the understanding of the outside world, and so that is kind of why oftentimes we get here that capitalism provides these things, that a capitalist state provides these things, and we don't realize that it's capitalism as workers, in their own cooperative way, not as a state itself. The state has to be for the people. And when the bread touches the authorities or the Duma or the Congress, it's not going to make its way back out to the country. And, Bishop Nakan, as he says here, is kind of, he's like realizing that he's trying to figure out why it won't do anything. It reminds me kind of when you see somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene say that these corporations are communists, because she doesn't understand that the corporations in the United States are certainly not communists. They're the farthest thing from it, but they're corrupt. And she just thinks communism's corrupt. Like, that's all that she was ever able to know, is that communism is corrupt. And a lot of her followers, that's the most that they will ever be able to know. And that's because that's what their material conditions allowed them to know. Because, the individual consciousness is based on their material conditions. So yeah, thank y'all for tuning in. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Tumblr, and Medium. Y'all have a great day. Dodadagoi. Marxist, on all of those. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Tumblr, Medium, Marxist. Y'all have a great day. Dodadagoi.